welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Wendy Dillard here. Today is Tuesday, January 16, 2018 at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. This is your second daily dose of happy for the day, and we've decided that today we're going to set a deadline, which sounds just absolutely dastardly, but we're going to set deadlines, and we're going to talk about deadlines. So if you deal with a lot of deadlines, you probably want to listen to this. But before we get to the deadline, anything good going on, Wendy? Anything happy? Any wins?
Well, I have not missed any deadlines.
Hooray!
Yes, that is a good thing. Actually, today was kind of fun for me because after coming back to work after being off for a week, I normally have so much to do that I just feel, overwhelmed. And that's when I get to practice good time management skills. But one of the things I've gotten to experience is because I'm training somebody to back me up for times when I am gone, she's really excited about wanting more opportunities to do what I normally do. And so she's been kind of doing my normal job.
Wow.
While I've been able to knock off all sorts of things that normally I feel so pressed for time that I've been a little bit unbalanced today going, oh, no, I really have time to do this. And I'm still working on it, and the world hasn't come to an end. And I realize it's because, in a sense, I've delegated the majority of what I do to somebody else. And so it feels really kind of sneaky.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I haven't done anything wrong.
Nope.
And I'm like, wow, is this what it feels like when people delegate? Because I've never been a very good delegator.
Oh.
I'm like, I could kind of get used to this. Delegation is kind of fun.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's even more fun when you delegate and you sit back and you say, wow, my workload just dropped in half. This is good. I like this.
Exactly. Like I remember a long time ago I had a housekeeper, and it was such an awesome feeling when she was here because I would be in my office working, and I would hear her around the house dusting and cleaning and vacuuming and whatnot. And when she left, I felt like it was an incredible day of production because there was two of me. I mean, granted, one of me wasn't me, but it was like I got the work done of two people, and I'm like, I like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Delegating has always come fairly easy to me, but I've also been in the same spot that you've been in where there's just too many hats to wear and not enough hands to hand the hats around to, so you're wearing all the hats. And that you live with that long enough. And like you said, when you finally get the opportunity to hand some stuff off to somebody else, it's disorienting because you're so used to be carrying this huge load all the time. And all of a sudden the load is lifted like, well, I don't know what to do with myself. That's the feeling of it,
aren't
right?
I supposed to be stressed?
Yeah,
and
right.
Like, I'm not.
Wait a minute. I'm used to that stress. I've lived with that stress for a long time now.
So how about you? Any wins today?
Just the ongoing ones. They just keep building. We're up to 32 co-authors of the book now. And I've been reaching out to more people, getting more people expressing interest and asking for the outline about what it's all about and so forth. So that just continues to keep going. And I just love the way, particularly with the last 5 to 10 people on the list who've signed up as co-authors. Many of them I didn't have to even go after at all. They were just people who were sent to us by somebody who had already signed up as a co-author themselves. So the referral effect has been kicking in. And let me tell you, I don't care what it is that you do, anything that you do where you're trying to market or promote or sell or anything like that, and you get the referral effect going, that's the best. That is absolutely the best. Because you don't have to work hard anymore. You just keep it going. You don't have to push. You don't have to cold call. You don't have to do all those nasty things. People are just saying, yeah, hey, I'm interested in this too. Give it to me, It's really a great feeling.
It's kind of a cousin to delegation.
It is, yes. Yes, It's the best kind of delegation because it's delegating the chore of trying to get more people involved to the people who are involved. And if they love it, if they're enthusiastic about it, which our crowd is. By the way, not only is our crowd enthusiastic, I'm discovering just how talented our crowd is. I mean, we're putting together a pool of people who are really, really talented, not just because of their extensive training with the law of attraction, but just in general. I mean, some of the skill sets that are coming to my attention just blow my mind. I don't even know how to take advantage of most of the skill sets, but it really shows how high-powered the people really are. So I'm excited. I'm really excited.
I like playing in a pool of people who are really high caliber.
Yeah. This is a good thing. It's like I was telling Cindy after this morning's show, when we did our, we always do chats right after we do the shows, and like I was telling her, I am having more fun because for most of my self-employed life, I would provide marketing services. I would, help people with local businesses who needed help in getting their business marketed and promoted and so forth. And most of the time, this is not something that people would necessarily expect, but most of the time when you perform that kind of service, you're constantly trying to talk your client into accepting the service, even though they came to you for that service in the first place. Which I know sounds really weird, but people get preconceptions. They get preconceptions about how the whole thing is supposed to go, and most of the preconceptions they get are misconceptions. They don't realize it. They're going with popular ideas about how you do things like online. The one thing that I always heard first with somebody who wanted help with online marketing was, "So, can you do my SEO for me?" And as I've told you privately offline, SEO is way overrated, so I try to educate them about that, and the pushback was crazy. So most of my self-employed life has been just dealing with pushback, and it's hard enough to help promote a client's business, but when the client is pushing against you, now you're pushing against the client, and you're pushing to try to get the business marketed. It's not a happy situation. And so up until now, I've never really had the opportunity to promote any of my own stuff, or certainly to put all of my own ideas into practice, and now I'm getting to do that. And Wendy, I can't tell you how excited I've become over it. I mean, I am really getting psyched over being able to do, like I know how to do this. I wake up in the morning and I say to myself, I know how to do this. I really know how to do this.
It is such a nice feeling when you get to take your skills and use them for yourself instead of for somebody else. And you get to recognize, oh my gosh, I'm good at what I do, and now it's all about me, and I finally get to benefit for my skills. Cool.
And what's really cool is there's always a lot of talk about, me versus helping others and so forth. And I think so much of it ends up being wheel spinning. But when you get into the place where you're really helping yourself, like I'm able to do right now, I'm finding I'm loving it in part because now I can also help a whole bunch of other people at the same time. It's really the only time you can help someone else, and that's when you're helping yourself the most. But it's one of those concepts that's really hard for most people to grasp onto,
I get it. I do get it. It is fun.
It is fun.
And I'm very happy for you. I'm really
well,
excited
thank you.
For you.
I'm glad that you're a part of it. I really am.
Aww,
so,
thanks.
yeah. So, okay, deadlines. So there's the difficult topic for the day because anybody who has worked in the modern workplace knows all about deadlines, and they're not fun. They're not always, what you had in mind in the first place for yourself. They're usually set by a boss. But there are also aspects of our lives where we set our own deadlines, or we consider the idea of setting deadlines. And the question arises, and this is a question you brought up, so I should probably let you introduce it rather than me. But the question arises, is it always a good idea to set a deadline? Because it really depends, doesn't it, on how you react to it. If the deadline spurs you to action, then it's good. But if the deadline holds you back, then what's the point of it?
So to me, the topic was deadlines, helpful or harmful. And I didn't really have a judgment on it. I really wanted to explore the question because for me, I agree with you that oftentimes people feel pressure and stress by deadlines. But on the flip side, I think there's a downside of not having a deadline. And like yesterday, for example, when I was talking about how I wanted to test myself, my own law of attraction skills with the law of attraction, I put out a deadline, which is something I generally don't do. And I was thinking about that today as in, so is it a good thing that I put a deadline? And I'm kind of getting an internal yes, because when I don't put a deadline, things can just kind of float on infinitum and never really happen because I don't really get myself to focus intensely in order to actually bring something about. And so I can see how sometimes a deadline is really helpful. Like, here's a good one that you got to experience with me. So you put out the book proposal, and on it you had what I considered a very short ramp-up time from the time we knew about it until when you wanted our finished chapter.
Deliberately so, I might add, but I'll go into that in a minute.
Well, and I looked at that and I went, oh, my God, it's basically from the time we say, yes, we want to do it, we had 2 weeks. Well, because of my personal work style, that's a creativity thing that I normally don't often do, which is, writing. And I can do it, I just don't do it that often. So it's not a skill where I just sit down and boom, it comes out of me, unless I'm inspired. And I can't plan when I'm going to be inspired. So the way I work is if I have a big block of time, or I should say many big blocks of time, where if the inspiration strikes me and I recognize, oh, I have a big block of time, I'll utilize it and go for it. But at the time that you had proposed the book to me, I was thinking, okay, I had a week coming off, but I already had other things to do. And I didn't want to use it for writing because that comes with its own set of pressures. And it's like, to me, what I really needed for my week off was true R&R, where it was unscheduled, unplanned time to just let whatever happens, happen.
Yep.
Well, then, when am I going to write the book? Well, you already know I work 10 to 14 hours a day at my day job, between the day job and our radio show.
Right.
And I need a fresh brain to do some good writing. But then all that leaves is weekends.
Yep.
Well, my weekends are the only time I can do things like grocery shopping and getting my hair cut and just the normal stuff. And so when you proposed it to me, I thought I could not in that moment foresee when I could get it done and feel good about it. And so in that moment, the deadline caused me to feel pressure, and I was very stressed over it. So... And I shared that with you, and you were very lovely about your comments. You said, "Well, I'll if it takes you a little bit longer, it's okay. It's not the end of the world." But I like to get things done by a deadline. I don't like to be an exception to the rule. I like to be within a deadline. That's just my own sense of order. So, on the day that my vacation, I think you proposed it on a Friday, and then I was off the next Saturday.
Right.
And something in me was like, okay, let's see if I could just surprise myself. And then I superimposed my own deadline that I would have the chapter written before my vacation was over.
Wow.
That wasn't your deadline.
No.
Your deadline was still 2 weeks out.
That's right.
I superimposed my own deadline. And I thought about it a lot. I got really excited about it, and I thought, oh, my gosh, it would feel so good to know that I have this whole week in front of me. I'm not going to use the whole week, but there's plenty of time in there that creativity can strike. And if I can have it done before I go back to work, then I will, relieve the pressure valve. And that's what I did. I had the inspiration I thought I was going to write on Saturday, didn't happen. Thought I was going to write on Sunday, didn't happen. Monday, I didn't plan on writing, and that's when the inspiration struck, and that's when I did a bulk of the writing. And then I was busy for the next couple days, and I didn't get back to it until Sunday, maybe early afternoon. And I wrote the rest of the day and proofed it early that evening, and I hit send to you before I went to bed.
Okay.
And so that's where, and honestly, I didn't even know I was going to say this. I didn't even think about it until I started talking, that when I superimposed my own deadline, that was potent.
Ah. Okay. So if I can take it from a different point of view to kind of fill out the story a bit. First of all, people should know that the story that Wendy submitted, and by the way, these are stories about LOA manifestations. The story she submitted is absolutely killer. It is a terrific story, and we're going to be using it to help promote the book. It's that good of a story. So I'm just giving you a tease up front. The book's probably not going to get published till sometime in February, or we're going to give you plenty of warning when it's coming. But you'll want to get the book just to read that story because it is that good. Now, I also wanted to tell you that the reason I decided to do really tight deadlines, and I agree, Wendy, that the deadlines I set were really tight. They were so tight that I've already moved one of them, and that was the deadline I'd set for myself to get the co-authors to sign up. Because by the time I'd set the deadline, I only had half of them, and gave myself a couple more days, and I got up to about about 60%, but still not enough. So my new deadline is, the deadline for signing up is when I get my 50th co-author, and then the door's closed.
Got it.
But, I don't have any trouble moving deadlines like that, because the deadline, they are arbitrary in this case. It's not like there's a company that's going to go out of business if we don't hit the deadline. That's not the case at all. What I wanted to do is I wanted to stir up excitement, because I wanted people to realize that if they were going to sign up to participate in this, they were participating in something that was going to publish in a month. It was going to come out really, really soon. And that I knew was going to create all kinds of excitement in people's minds. And sure enough, it has. I mean, the responses, when I get responses from somebody saying, yeah, I'm really interested, it's not like, I'm sort of interested. It's like full of superlatives. Yeah, this is a great idea. This sounds really good. Send me the details. I can hardly wait. So I know that the sense of urgency that I set up served that purpose really well. The tricky part, and you represented the tricky part, is that not everybody's going to respond the same way. Some people are going to feel pressured, and you felt pressured. What I love is the way you turned the pressure into something that served you rather than tearing you down. So kudos to you for that. That was really good. And when you're setting a deadline for a group of people, that's hard, because you can't possibly set deadlines in a way that's going to suit everybody. There's just no way to do it. So you hope that whoever it doesn't really suit, they find a way to make it work for themselves, and you did that. And so you took the stress off of me when you did that.
Oh, and I gave us something to talk about, right, on the show.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So here's a case where deadlines actually ended up providing a positive spur, so to speak, an incentive to let's jump into this. This is going to be a great project. Everybody's going to benefit from it. Let's do it. Let's get it done. So that's a good use of a deadline. There can also be unhealthy uses of deadlines, though. And there are usually situations where the people who are involved in the deadline setting, or who are receiving the deadline, let's put it that way, are not usually involved in the decision-making process. And so the deadline is imposed upon them, and there are very negative consequences that go along with missing the deadline. I mean, I wasn't setting any kind of negative consequences. The worst was, at very, very worst, you wouldn't get in. Heck, I'd get you in anyway. So it was not going to be any severe situation. But for instance, if it's like your job's on the line, if you don't hit the deadline, that's a mega stress situation. And
right.
Usually I found that those deadlines have two characteristics. One, they didn't need to be as tight as they were. And two, the consequences are often way more severe than they need to be for missing the deadline, to the point where you can actually undermine a company's culture by doing it. And yet, there are so many CEOs and managers who do that anyway. And I've always found that fascinating. They don't seem to realize they're undercutting their own intention of getting jobs done in time.
Well, I can think of some deadlines that have been imposed at the job that I worked for, where it's, because I've worked there 10 years, I know certain cycles, and I know where certain deadlines are going to fall, although they adjust slightly. And sometimes it just blows my mind that somebody doesn't think through how a deadline is going to affect people. Like, for instance, there's certain deadlines that were given that happen in December. Well, in my business unit, I would probably say at least 75% of the people I work with take off the last 2 weeks of December. So to ask anybody in the second or third week of December to all of a sudden do something, to me is just cruel. Because I remember one of the years of working there that some deadline came out in the third week of December. Almost everybody on my team was on vacation, and yet I have the people I work for are all very high-powered executives, and so they keep in touch with their cell phones and their email. And every one of them was coming back to their desk and working for days and days and days to crank out the information that was necessary for the deadline. And that's the kind of thing that, my thought is, really? Who on earth came up with this? Were they not thinking about the very people that they work for, that they like covet and say, oh, you're wonderful, and yet they throw this kind of garbage out there?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm not quite sure where that all fits in law of attraction. Haven't really thought about it, but those are kinds of deadlines that to me I find highly annoying.
Well, I think we can say what the law of attraction tends to deliver. I mean, an equivalent vibration to that would be something that comes back to the person who set the deadline in the first place that isn't well thought out because they themselves didn't think the deadline out well. So, of course, it's got to be something that comes back to them that has an equal level of vibration. And yet people don't tend to learn, I found, when they're like that. I can tell you a story. This story may kind of hone in on what you're talking about. This happened, when was it? This is about 1994, something like that. I can't remember exactly what year it was. 93 maybe. I was managing a production department at what was known at the time as a pre-press house. Now, pre-press has pretty much disappeared, but for those who aren't aware, for those who aren't aware of it, pre-press is what you used to do when you were preparing the negatives to be used to put onto a printing press to print something.
Oh,
and
okay.
there's a whole bunch of stuff that's involved with that. It includes what they call the 4-color separation, where you set up the color plates that end up being used for the 4 inks, like you find in an inkjet printer. You know, the cyan, magenta, yellow, black. Well, that was the same inks that you used on a printing press in order to make full color documents. And so you prepare all that stuff so that when you handed it off to the printer and they made the plates from it, you know, they could get perfect reproductions on the printer. So that's what we did a lot of. And I remember I only was there for less than a year. I was managing the department. I was working with an undertrained staff and an underpaid staff, I might add, that was given really more work than they could reasonably do on a badly set up production system. And I won't go into the details of it except to say that the guy who owned the company had no clue how to set up a production system, and he proved it with the production system he set up. I mean, I'm not kidding. It was really bad. It was so badly thought out. I can give you one flavor of it. The printing press that it wasn't a press. It was what they call a linotype or a negative printer. The printer that we were using that put these negatives out was designed for somebody who's running a newspaper, putting out great big flats of pages, because they would do entire sets of pages on a single negative. So you can imagine it's printing out this really wide piece of film, right? And we're using it to print out little 8.5 by 11 flyers. You can imagine how much film waste there's going to be. Now, why did he do that? Yeah. Well, he said, well, if we have all these 8.5, 11 jobs and we gang them all up, we'll actually save money on the printing. Now, how often did it actually happen you could do that? Almost never. So we were losing money like crazy because this guy had this insane idea about how you save money. I mean, he was an idiot. He really was an idiot. But anyway, come Christmas, the day before Christmas, Christmas Eve, it's our last day before the holiday, and he comes in at 4 p.m. and announces to us that there is a vitally important job for a really important customer, that if we get the job done by Christmas Day, we will get a customer that will support the company for years to come. So he basically was asking us to work overnight on Christmas Eve to get this job out the door. And we did. We actually worked through Christmas Eve into Christmas morning in order to get this job out the door, and we did it on time. We were exhausted. We were sleep deprived. We were angry. We were frustrated. We were bitter, but we got it done. And I knew from that point on, I knew I needed to take a closer look at what's going on, because this was like the latest in a long series of things that were really badly thought out, and you could just tell. So I started looking more closely, and by that January, a month later, I had done enough research to figure out that this company was in deep trouble. I'd asked some questions. I'd been very covert about it, very clever in my questioning and so forth, so it didn't look like I was doing anything, but I was piecing together a case like a detective would. And I figured out that company was going to be out of business in about 6 months. They were going to be completely bankrupt. And that this whole thing about getting this client by doing this work overnight had nothing to do with providing work that would get us work for the next 10 years. It had to do with covering the owner's ass because he'd screwed up. And that's what it was all about.
And that was just kind of like his marketing verbiage to get everybody on board to get this project done.
So I did something I had never done before. I ended up subverting the culture of the company. I told all my employees I am quitting in the next few days. Law of attraction. The day after I figured all this out, we got a visit from one of his competitors. The owners of one of his competing companies came to visit him, and while there, came into the back room, into the production area, and said, I want to talk to you. We went out to lunch. He said, I want to offer you a job.
He said to you?
Yeah.
Or to the owner?
To me. He wanted to offer me a job to manage his second shift at his company.
Wow.
So I immediately said yes. And then
and you know what? And I know there's more to this story, but let's just piece it in, because this is how I'm seeing law of attraction. It's like your anger, because you used some really strong language. There was anger and bitterness, not to mention sleep deprived. So in that moment, you were creating such a preference where you desired never to endure something like that again and to have been treated better.
And I was determined to get out. I mean, literally.
And, you told your people, I'm out of here.
I'm out of here.
You created that.
Yeah, I was done. I didn't care if I had another job. I just wanted to get out. I wanted to get out as fast as possible. And I called a staff meeting to basically tell everybody what my research had uncovered and to advise them to start job hunting as quickly as possible to get out of there. Which, of course, is the one thing you don't do if you're the manager of a department in a company. But there was no way I could continue for even 1 hour more there in good conscience and not tell them what I had learned, what I had figured out, because that's just the wrong thing to do. And some of these people I counted as friends. In fact, I'll tell you, the last day I was there, the one who I had most recently hired, he was a young African-American guy, really nice guy. And he said, I was wondering if you could be willing to, come by. I want you to meet my family tonight. Now, you have to understand, this was 10 o'clock at night. And we didn't have normal hours in this place. And I said, it's 10 o'clock at night. And he says, oh, no, that's okay. I want my kids to meet you. I said, well, won't they be asleep? He says, well, that's right. We'll wake them up. I said, no, we can't do that. No, you come over. And so he talked me into going over to his house. He lived in a very poor section of town. He wasn't even married, but he and his girlfriend were essentially de facto married, if you can understand what I mean. They had a 3-bedroom apartment. It was not in a nice part of town. And crammed into those 3 bedrooms were, I kid you not, 13 children.
Holy cow.
I have never seen living conditions like that. And we got there, and he woke everybody up, and they all came out, and they were thanking me. They were thanking me for how I had hired him, given him an opportunity, even though they knew that the job wasn't going to last more than another few months. They knew that was the case. They were still thanking me for that. They were thanking me. I was just blown away. I was practically in tears, and think they're treating me like the king, and I just wanted to do something to help all of them.
Oh my goodness, that is such a beautiful story.
It was just overwhelming. So, I mean, that's how important the people were to me. There was absolutely no way I was not going to tell them what was going on. And if it also happened to stick the dagger into the back of the owner of the company, that was okay with me too. So bottom line is, I missed my prediction by 1 month. I said it was going to take 6 months. It took 5 months for them to go out of business. And when they finally closed their doors, a couple of things happened. First, the few who had remained, they knew what was happening, but they just didn't have anywhere else to go, and they weren't really aggressive about trying to get work, so they were just out of work at that point. The owner of the company, I found out, had sold shares in the company to one of the employees and then screwed him out of the shares at the last minute in order to try to pay off the debts. I mean, this guy was a piece of work. And then on top of everything else, all his efforts failed miserably, despite his every attempt to climb out from under it, despite his every attempt to blame everybody else and pass the financial load to everybody else. He's the one who took the biggest part of the hit. And basically, he lost his family's money. His family had invested in the company, and he lost their money. So he basically drew into himself what the law of attraction said he should have. He had set up these horrible vibrations, and they came back and bit him in the butt. So, long story short, deadlines. We're talking about deadlines, right? Now, that deadline story that I told you about Christmas Eve, that was the worst of them. But there were a number of deadlines that had been set like that, and all of them had been so high stress. Look what the result was. Not only did he drive his employees away, not only did he drive our stress levels through the roof, but he put himself out of business at the same time.
But I'm seeing how it affected you, which was really all very positive.
It was. Well, I chose to take it positively. I chose to think of it positively, which is interesting because I didn't know about the law of attraction yet.
But you went in first of all, the preference of you getting something good out of this had already been set in motion.
Yes.
Even if you were not aware of it.
Yes.
And then you also, being the character of the man that you are, moved in a positive direction. And, having that man's family be thankful to you, that's pretty significant.
Yeah.
So it's like deadlines have a different effect on everyone, just like everything has a different effect on everyone. But for you, you got to see how the law of attraction moved on your behalf to really create something quite lovely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got to see both sides, both the depravity of life and the virtue of life, the beauty of life, all in one story.
Yeah.
In fact, there's also a side story, too. I forgot to tell you this part. The man's wife also worked for the company, the owner. The owner's wife worked for the company as well. And I realized that what he was doing was not only ripping everybody else off, but he was going to rip his own family off. I knew that was coming. So I did the same thing for her that I did for my employees. I had a private meeting with her. I swore her to secrecy. I said, I don't want you to tell your husband what I'm telling you, but here's what I found out. And I laid out the whole thing for her. And I said, the reason I'm laying this out for you, I'm really concerned about you and your kids, about what's going to happen. And sadly, the way she took it was, she was a very codependent person, so she went right to him, told him what happened, and I got fired the next day, even though I already had a job to go to, so I didn't care. But so it's interesting. You put out all these vibrations, and in one case, it was the employees I was trying to help, and some of them were able to take the help. They were able to accept it. They weren't ready to receive it. They weren't going to resist it. Others were certainly receptive to the message, but they weren't ready to go take action. And then here's a third person, the guy's wife, and I gave her the information as a gift, and she basically tried to throw it back in my face. She wasn't ready to receive it at all. So you have three different kinds of actions and reactions going on here to me trying to help people. And that alone, I think, is a learning experience, because it really proves, first of all, you can't help somebody who's not ready to be helped. Second of all, when they are ready to be helped, you don't need to do a whole lot. You just need to give them information, and then they go. They just do what they need to do. And the third thing is, you get to see both sides of humanity. You get to see the best of humanity, and you get to see the worst of it, all in one fell swoop.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
While you were sharing that, I was kind of going back to the story I was telling about how the 1 year I remember we had this deadline, and all the people who were on vacation kind of had to come back in order to do what needed to be done to meet the deadline.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't require anything of me because I was not in the role that deadline was set upon, I was so angry on behalf of my coworkers that worked so hard throughout the year. I wanted them to enjoy their time off.
Wow.
And, as I think about that, Walt, that deadline that was probably 8 years ago. That has never happened again.
Really?
Yeah. I'm like, I wonder how much my fury, and then picturing what it would look like if they could just all spend time with their families, I wonder how much of that, and of course it had to be at least some, helped to turn things around so that deadline would never be self-imposed on them again. Or it wasn't self-imposed. It was imposed upon them.
Right.
And then I'm also thinking about how year after year, usually in July, our company has this thing where we do this self-evaluation of your own performance, and you have to put it into this application we have online, basically to say, are we tracking mid-year toward what our goals are for the year? Mm-hmm. And it's something where you have to, for me, I have to go through all sorts of data and write down, yes, I did this, and so, gave me this praise for doing this, and this, because my job is not something where I can say, yes, I sold this many widgets and I did this many things, because I'm support staff. And, I've asked my boss, so how do you know if I've done my job well? And he said, people will tell me. Mm. Well, to be pretty subjective.
Yeah, it is.
And so during these self-evaluations, I do my best to find any kind of concrete evidence I can to support that I've really done my job well.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is not a fun thing for me. It's never been fun. I mean, first of all, you're kind of tooting your own horn.
Yep.
And not that I can't do that because I'm pretty darn good at it. It just doesn't feel comfortable in a professional employee-employer environment. So it's never something I look forward to, and we have to do it twice a year, mid-year and end of the year. And traditionally, I've always taken off time at the end of July, early August. And inevitably, the deadline for this is right like the week before I go on my vacation. But they don't tell us about it until we're right on the heels of, oh, by the way. Or actually, the truth is the deadline is while I'm on vacation, so we're given maybe 2 to 3 weeks notice. But if I'm out for 2 weeks and the deadline is the last day of my vacation, I kind of only get 1 week's notice.
Yeah, right.
And so this would happen year after year, and I got frustrated by it because, one, I already have a lot to do before I leave, but two, this puts extra pressure on me because it's doing this thing that just feels icky. That's a technical term.
The technical term, right, yes.
Project. So this year I was getting ready to go on my vacation, and I was talking to one of my coworkers who actually is above the chain, if you will. She's above me. And I said, they haven't put out the word yet when we have to do this. I don't know the deadline. And I said, today already is the last day of my before I go on vacation. And I said, I just don't want to, use my first day off, which is Saturday, to work on this so that it'll be handled in time, because I don't want to see it on an email while I'm on vacation, because I do my best not to look at emails or voicemails while I'm gone. And she says to me, she goes, no, you better do it. You're going to need to get it done. She goes, you're going to need to just set that Saturday aside and do it. And she goes, you'll be able to do it quick because, you're supposedly not working and people won't be bothering you.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And I was like, oh, she's probably right. But you know what? That didn't feel good to me.
No, it's cutting into your time.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to do that. Part of my enjoyment of taking a full Monday through Friday off is having the weekends bookend it so that I really get 9 days off, and that's a big deal to me. I love all that time. And so Friday night, I was working late to get done what needed to be done, and I just kept thinking about, should I come in tomorrow, and do it, which I know that sounds silly. Come in means wake up, walk across the hall, and go into my office, but no.
But it's the principle of the
thing. Do I want to give up my personal time?
Right.
And I really felt I was getting guided. Don't do it.
Really?
Just let it be. And I went, okay, this is kind of taking a risk because when it comes to deadlines, I believe that there are consequences, especially in a job, where if you don't meet the deadline, you'll somehow either get your hand slapped or it'll make me feel bad. And I was like, oh. And I went, okay, I'm going to trust my guidance more, and we're going to see what happens.
Good.
And I did not check email the whole time I was out.
That's
and
very
when
gutsy.
I came back on Monday, there was a newsletter that indicated that the deadline was for the following Friday. And I went, oh my gosh. See, every other year, and remember I've been here 10 plus years, every other year it always happened during the week I took off. And this time the deadline was pushed out like a week or 10 days.
Wow.
So I had time to return to my job, get pseudo caught up, and I was actually able to set aside an entire day to get that done. And I got it done on the deadline that it was required to be done. But I was so grateful, Walt, that at that point in my life, which is now, I have developed the ability to trust my inner guidance, follow it, knowing that the results will serve me. And it did.
Something.
And it was like, hot diggity. That was really nice. And then it makes me wonder, I wonder how much of my fretting and fuming and then turning things around going, I really wish the deadline would get pushed off so that it did not interrupt my vacation time.
Right. Yeah.
I think the universe did that just for me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's quite apparent that that's exactly what happened. And as we're talking here, I'm realizing there is a really critical consideration when trying to evaluate whether a deadline is helpful or harmful. And that is the intention behind the deadline. Like, for instance, with my story about, or our story actually, about the book that we're putting together, my intention with the deadline was purely to get people excited. I wasn't trying to, set people up to get their hands slapped or anything like that. It was just to get people excited and enthusiastic about doing the project. And it worked. That's exactly what it produced. The story of me with my production department at the printing press company, the deadline there was all about bailing out the owner who had made some bad decisions and basically wanted us to bail him out. And so it was a very negative kind of reason. It was a bad reason, really, to set a deadline. So he was basically going to hold our jobs over our heads because he screwed up. And look what the negative consequences of that decision were. I mean, they were catastrophic for him and his company. He thought he did really well because, well, we met the deadline, so that's all he really was interested in. But look what the fallout was after that. I mean, the entire company fell apart. He had to firing his production manager because his production manager figured out what his game was. So there's an example of how it works against you. I really do believe every single time it comes down to what your motivation is. If your motivation is good for the people who are involved, then a deadline can be a very effective thing. It can be a great way to get energy up and get everybody focused on the same thing and let's go do it together as a team and all this kind of stuff. That can be a good kind of deadline. Or it can be the kind of deadline like you were talking about where, they're basically giving you 1 week to do a 3-week deadline and, and it's up to you to do it on your Saturday, on your day off in order to get their deadline met. And why did they set the deadline? Probably because they just didn't get around to setting it before then. They just didn't think about it. And I can even think of cases where people have set deadlines mainly because they just didn't know what they were doing. That sounds like the same case, with your bosses there. They just didn't really know what they were doing with deadlines. And that's probably one of the worst things you can do is set deadlines just to set deadlines. Just because, I can tell you an example that's current, actually, now that I think about it. There's a guy who I've done some work with over the years. I've known him for quite some time. And he contacted me and said, I've got a client I'm working with. This is a manufacturer. They need a new website. We're going to do a marketing campaign and so forth. I was wondering if you could do the web page building because I know you're good at it. And he gave me the details of that. And he says, now here's the thing. We need to have the whole thing done by Monday, January 15th. And I'm not sure when I'm going to get all the copy. We may only have a week to do this. But we have to get it done. It's essential. It's part of a big campaign they're doing. So I said, oh, all right. It wasn't a really big job, so I figured, okay, I can squeeze it in. Not a problem. And come 3 or 4 days before the 15th, we still hadn't gotten it yet. And he got in touch with the owners. Turns out the company is actually owned by 4 people who don't get along. And the bottom line is that the deadline had been set by one of them without consulting with the other 3. And the deadline was artificial. It had actually no basis in anything other than him trying to impress everybody with how quickly he gets things done. And furthermore, it didn't actually fit in with the plans of the other 3. So the whole deadline got scuppered. And the last I heard was, we'll let you know when we're ready to go ahead with the project. This was a project that was hot. It had to be done by the 15th, and all of a sudden it just disappeared into nothingness. Now,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, now, there's a lot of ways you could look at that, but the way I look at it is the person setting the deadline was insane. He was trying to do something that really doesn't make any sense, except if you try to look at it from an extremely unrealistic point of view of, well, if I do this, then I'll look good, even though the facts couldn't possibly support that. So he set the deadline on others, and it came back and basically popped him in the face. Which wasn't his intention at all, but there's an example of how a deadline actually harmed, and he's the one who set the deadline.
Well, and I guess I don't even look at it in terms of harm, because we all learn what we learn based on whatever information shows up in our world.
Sure.
It probably gave a lot of insight to his partners as to what was going on. So it may have been, it didn't serve one person, but it served the other 3. And even the one it didn't serve, maybe in the long run it did serve him.
Hopefully.
Depending on how he chooses going forward to make new choices.
Yeah, that would be great if he did that. Then it would serve him very well. That's true.
When I worked at a costume company years ago, we'd have clients come in, and this happens so very often, where they needed something and they needed it yesterday. And if it was a costume that like we had hanging on the racks, it was an easy thing. But if it was something we didn't have, but they had very specific needs, it might be something we'd have to actually produce and create from scratch. And they're like, well, can you get it done by like tomorrow at 3? Now, we were a pretty talented crew, and there was a lot we could do. But to do that meant we'd have to move other projects aside, and I was the production manager, and so I'd have to like go through our time sequence and determine, okay, can we afford to move this other project? And we have other people who are actually sewing on this right now, but they're not slated for tomorrow. And, so I'm working through all the schedules. But, that was the company where I learned the phrase, lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part.
Right.
Have you heard that phrase before?
Not only have I heard it, as you can tell from the stories, I've lived it.
Okay. Well, at first I thought it was a cute little thing. It's like somebody at the company had put that sign up on the wall, and we would all giggle because we thought it was cute. And we'd laugh because of how often we had clients walking through the door with, emergencies. Some that they created,
Sure.
the emergency, and some it wasn't really an emergency, but they walked in like it was one. And as I got older, I started to take in that concept. Lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. And the reason I took that to heart is because I'm a mega planner. And so I rarely have deadlines that have urgencies, or fire drills attached to them. Because I usually plan things out with plenty of time to get things done in a way that has ease. But inevitably, I had people who were superimposing their stuff into my perfectly well thought out plan and schedule. And I'm like, I don't like this. But little did I realize that because I was so good at what I did, and I could infuse their emergencies into my planning, and I could get their stuff done as well as everything else I needed done, what I had trained people to know about me was I could do that, and that I could have them bust through the boundaries of my really good planning, and I would make room for that stuff. And so everybody in the company came to know that if there was an emergency, Wendy can figure it out because she can do anything. Well, you know what, on the surface, when I was in my 20s, that was a really cool thing to go, oh, people know me as someone who can do anything. That's so cool. It really stroked my ego.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't so cool as I was getting into my 30s and then some, because I was feeling really taken advantage of.
I don't blame you.
And I just kept hearing the phrase, lack of planning on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on my part. And one day I thought to myself, when am I going to take that to heart? When am I going to set the boundary and say, I'm sorry, I can't make that happen for you? And, of course, when you, like for me, every project I did was money going into my pocket, and I was freelancing, and so because I was self-employed, I felt like I was at the mercy of other people's emergencies, because if they had an emergency, it meant money in my pocket that I didn't have otherwise. And I remember, and I know this for certain, that all of those times that I was up until 4, 5, 6 in the morning sewing on something because I needed the money so bad from this project that came in very last minute, and see, everybody else they went to said no, but here I am, a lone wolf, going, oh, yeah, I'm hungry and I'm desperate for funds, so sure, I'll do it. I remember while I was sitting at my sewing machine during those times, knowing the rest of the world is asleep and I'm working like a dog, you know what? This is not how I want to live my life. I want to have a level of choice where money, the thought of being able to make money, is not the thing that they, like the carrot, the proverbial carrot that they're holding in front of me. I don't want to be strung around by money anymore. I want to be able to have the kind of boundaries where I say, you know what? I'll do if I choose to, but I'm sorry, you'll have to find someone else who's needier than me, because I'm not going to give up my day or my nighttime to work on this project because you didn't plan in advance, because guess what? I do. I do plan things out. And as I'm thinking about it now, those deadlines that others had that I then accepted as my own deadline have really served me well to set up very wonderful circumstances in my life that I rarely have rarely have deadlines anymore that I say yes to that I don't want to say yes to.
That's good.
And I'm in a very different place with deadlines. But what really caused this topic to come to mind for me is how I was talking yesterday about how I rarely set my own deadlines for things I want to manifest, where there's not a real hardcore deadline, but I want there to be, because I don't want something that I do want to manifest in my life to never happen. And so it's easy for us because we've been talking a lot about other people who've set a deadline. But what we haven't really said much about is when we choose to set a deadline, because it will help to inspire action. It'll help to inspire a creation. Just like when you set the deadline, even though it was a flexible deadline about the chapter, I imposed my own personal deadline to get it done. And I had joy while doing it. And so I'm kind of realizing when I set my own deadline, it's a good thing. I don't like to have to work with other people's deadlines. So even though you put one out there, the fact that I set a deadline that was 2 weeks before actually made me feel much freer. Isn't that interesting?
Well, it makes sense. And it kind of fits in with my thesis that it really depends what the motivation is behind the deadline. Because the motivation you're describing in that case is not only self-imposed, but it's self-imposed because it fits you so well, that you know yourself well enough that, yeah, this is the best way I need to do it. This is how I'll get the most energy. This is how I'll get, the most enthusiasm, and I'll just dive right into it and so forth. That's the perfect use of a deadline. That's absolutely ideal. That's really what deadlines are supposed to do. They're supposed to give you a way to get done what you need to get done in the way you need to get it done.
That makes sense, because I know when I had talked about the air conditioner that I bought for my house to replace the one that died, it was a really huge expense, and I had to put it on 2 credit cards. But because I did them on promotional offers, where as long as I paid them off by a certain date, there'd be no interest.
Right, yeah.
To me, that was a deadline. Now, granted, there once was a time I didn't have that kind of money that I could have even made that deadline. Mm-hmm. But I knew that there was a good possibility I could do that, and so I focused on it. And it was like, I don't want to just make that deadline. I want to pay it off even before that. So I, in my own mind, set up 1 year, even though the credit cards had 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I kept thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it and planning for it and working towards it. And I was watching, myself chunk off dollars on the balance. And when I paid it off one day before a year, it was like I won a game. Now, I'm the one who created the game.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And it was a deadline,
yeah.
But it wasn't a credit. It wasn't any kind. I mean, even if I didn't pay it off in the 18 months, the credit card company still was going to let me pay it off. They just would start charging me interest. But it was fun for me. And so, as I'm thinking about it, I do really well when I superimpose my own deadlines because I make them games. They're very fun for me.
And plus, you make them realistic. You make them achievable. You make them something that, you could actually take a prize away for yourself when you win it, when you get there, when you meet the deadline.
The one I started talking about yesterday where I said I've set some big something out there that I've never done this big, it's never been done by me before. Mm-hmm. But my belief has grown so big in the law of attraction that I really believe I can make it happen. I don't know how. And I'm almost excited about not knowing how because I'm excited about seeing how the law of attraction is going to spin the cooperative components to generate what I'm looking to generate.
And isn't it interesting how belief plays a role in this? Belief plays a major role in this. You believe deeply that it's going to happen, in part because of what you've learned about LOA, but also because you believe in yourself. Belief is like at the core of whether or not a deadline is a good thing to set. If you believe it, if you believe that you can actually achieve it, that you can meet it, and that it will produce good results for you, then the law of attraction says that has to be true, and it is. Yeah, it's very cool stuff.
So I'm kind of excited, and I think another reason I wanted to talk about deadlines today was to shore up my own knowingness, my own belief system, that the fact that I put the end of June as it's going to happen by that day or before is kind of exciting to me because it's like I want to talk about that more because I know the more I talk about it, the more I'm spinning the energy. The more I'm spinning the energy, the more law of attraction is adding more momentum to the thing that I'm wanting to create, and I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about it. And the more it takes shape and the more I start to see, I'll tell you this, I'll put this out there. When I start to see physical evidence, that will be the day I'll talk about it on the radio.
Oh, okay.
And share it so that other people can join me because I have a feeling once I share what it is, other people are going to want to do it too.
Well, we don't want to take it away from you. I mean, it is yours, so I think you're perfectly
Well, no, I
reasonable
mean,
to do
a teaser that they can do it for themselves as well. It's not something that only one of us can have this.
Oh, okay,
We
good.
can all do this one.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, good.
So that was just my teaser.
Okay. Hey, that's a good teaser. That's good. Because we want people to keep listening. And by the way, we haven't really gotten much in the way of commercial messages into these deadline conversations. But if you're enjoying this show, we want you to do two things. First of all, let your friends know about it because this daily dose of happy really is. It makes you feel good every day. And you pick up stuff, you learn stuff, you think about stuff in ways you hadn't thought about it before. And other people appreciate that too. We know that people like it. We can tell for a fact because they keep listening to episodes more and more every month. And we can just see it in the analytics. It shows up. Last month, every unique listener on average listened to 22 episodes. So we know people are listening to this thing. So share the message because other people want to have the same experience and you can be giving them something really great. You can give them their daily dose of happy. On top of that, if you haven't subscribed, guess what? It's your turn. You need to subscribe too. That's how you can stay on top of it and get all the podcasts that we put out coming right to your iPhone or right to your Android phone, whatever Android phone you have, whether it's a Samsung, iOS, Motorola, whatever, Nokia, doesn't matter which model it is. You can get it coming right to your phone so that they're all right there and whatever spare time you have to listen and get your daily dose, it's right there. You can just get it. It's easy to do. You just go to loatoday.net. That's the easiest way. Click on the subscribe here button and that will tie directly into your podcast software. You can also on an iTunes go to the iTunes store and just do a search on LOA Today, 2 words. And or you can also do it through your podcast software that's built into the iPhone. You can do a search through that as well. It works equally well. On Android phones like the Samsungs and Motorola's and so forth, it's a little bit different because they don't come with a built-in podcast player. So you have to get the player first. And, of course, the way to do that, as with anything else, is to download an app from the Play Store. The one we're recommending is Podcast Manager, but there are a lot of them that are out there, a lot of freebie ones. Some of them you pay for, some are free. But you have to download one of those first and install the app. And then once you have the app, then you can do the search for LOA Today, and bang, will just pop right up. So subscribe today. And we're hoping more and more people subscribe because our numbers are increasing. They're increasing at a dramatic rate, and we just wanted to make it more dramatic.
Well, if we weren't getting an increasing number of people, well, I would say we might not want to continue to do this, but I know you, Walt. You've been doing this for 5 years, even when you had 0 people listening, and you just loved it so much you just kept going. Which I have to give you incredible kudos for your persistence and the fact that you love doing this. Because if you didn't love doing it and you were doing it for the results, you would have quit a long time ago.
Oh, easily,
and so
yeah.
It's just obvious that you do it for the love of doing it. And then eventually you started to really turn up the heat on the energy because you joined, you added so many of us co-hosts and we get to play with you on a regular basis. And it's just such a blast. I mean,
it is, isn't it?
It is so fun to do this. It is so very fun.
And it's fun to listen to it because we know from listeners who've called in or sent in emails, they're enjoying it too. So, I mean, this is like win-win-win. It's the best kind of scenario there is, I think. And I'm glad everybody's enjoying it as much as I am because that just makes my enjoyment so much better. But anyway, we just have a little bit of time left. During that time, how can they reach you, Wendy? Because sometimes people need a little bit of direct help, when they're dealing with issues. It might be deadlines or it might be other issues related to the law of attraction. But how do they reach you for some personal coaching?
Well, working with me is not working with just a coach because I'm a teacher, I'm a mentor, and I love to help utilize what you already know about law of attraction, but apply it in your life in a way that it makes sense and you start to move the needle. You start to feel a difference in how you're living, because now you're living with well-being and you're thriving. So if you want to work with me, you can reach out to me via wendydiller.com, and all of my contact information is out there on my website.
Very cool. Let's do it again tomorrow, Wendy. I can't wait.
I'll be here.
I'll be here, too. Well, and we hope you're here, too, as well, here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye now.